Meeting room. All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for coming to our March expert session. We are focusing today on the fundamental questions around project seeking investments. So, what makes a project finance ready? As we prepare for jobs first to conclude and our projects moving from planning to implementation, we know that brings a new set of opportunities, but also challenges. So today we're going to focus on the foundations, determining whether a project can attract capital in the first place. And so encourage you to think of questions about that for our presenters. And yeah, the goal is to just better understand what lenders, investors, and partners are looking for so that we can ensure projects across the Redwood region move forward with stronger foundations and a clear path to financing. So we're very fortunate to be joined by two experts who bring great perspectives on projects from concept to finance ready. So first, we'll hear from Kirk, who is a project manager and lead planner with more than 25 years of experience guiding public facilities, commercial development, and natural resource projects. He specializes in identifying early project constraints, navigating environmental compliance and permitting processes, and coordinating complex multi-agency efforts. He is a trained mediator and facilitator and also helps projects stay aligned, feasible, and focused on achieving real outcomes. And we're also joined by Ross, executive director of our beloved North Edge, which serves multiple counties across the region, Ross brings more than 30 years of experience in banking and regional finance and has focused his work on expanding access to capital, structuring community finance solutions, and strengthening local economic ecosystems. And here he comes on the phone. He also serves as vice president of the California Finance Consortium and has been widely recognized for his leadership in workforce and tribal economic development. So together, Ross and Kirk, thank you so much for helping us explore all sides of the equation, what makes a project financially viable and practically feasible. So our goal is really just to deepen our collective understanding of what makes a project ready and how we can support stronger projects across our region. And so with that, I'd love to welcome our speakers and turn it over to Kirk to kick us off. And thank you all for joining us today.
Great, thank you. You guys all hear me, I'm assuming. Well, thanks for having me. My name's Kurt Cahoon. I started Greenway Partners with two other partners who've since retired in 2008. So I'm fairly bad at math, but that's a long time. I'm a lot grayer and a lot has gone on since then. I've had a good opportunity to work with several of you on projects before, including Lee and I working together to make the Redwood Skywalk into reality. So that was pretty exciting and fulfilling project. I was promised a discussion more than a presentation, so I didn't come with slides or anything like that. So I'm interrupt me if I have things you want to ask about or if there's anything you need clarification on. I'm ready to answer questions as I go. So I think in the context of what we're discussing today, I would say that the project problem is never design or construction. The project problem is always capital and organizational. It's never design and it's never construction. And I say that I'm a designer and a planner. My partner's an architect. We have built and oversee construction, and they're incredibly important and powerful tools. And they should never be the first tools out of the bag, and they almost always are on projects that fail. And starting with an architect is never the right first step. So we realized that about 2 years after we started our business, we got involved in a project that had been stalled for, 2 decades. And it was a $12 million community project that had $100,000 within the organization's coffers. And boy, we don't know what to do. Can you help us? I was like, well, let's start over because you're never going to fund a $12 million project with $100,000. Let's go back to the basics. And it's really informed how I've looked at everything related to a project since then. We've completed dozens and dozens of projects at this point. We're focused exclusively on community facility projects, and I deem those to be projects that benefit the community or the organization we're working with. And I think that the most important thing for me to convey is that projects are strategic initiatives. If they are not strategic initiatives, they should not ever happen. And I would get paid a lot more money if I if I didn't believe that, and I just did what most people in my shoes do, which is fee for service consulting. And we get paid whether the project goes or not. And I have built my whole personal ethic professionally around making sure that the right things happen and not the wrong things. So that's informed. Hey, look at we have Ross. Hey there. Um, so I think just generally speaking, that is my kind of high level view. And to get two projects, get them clear on enabling a strategic initiative to happen, many times we get deeply involved in operational or organizational issues. And as so far as going to work on establishing strategic plans and mission vision alignment with a project outcome, like how does a project enable this organizational change or the strategic direction that you're trying to accomplish? Very often, as I said, most people start with, we really want more of this, or we really want more of this. And, wants and needs are two different things. So I work really hard at the beginning to find project breakers and break projects. Like I find validity in preventing somebody from wandering through the next 5 years trying to make something happen that will destroy them personally or their organization, bankrupt them, or make them emotionally exhausted. And so I really do work to break a project at the very beginning rather than let's find a way to make your project happen. It's rather, no, no, let's understand what we're trying to accomplish and why, and let's make sure that we can actually move you in the appropriate direction together. And I don't, I'm never, as those who have worked with me will attest, I'm very collaborative and I work as part of a team. I never take full credit nor would I want it all. I'm working on behalf of a team of people. And like I said, I've had good fortune to work with a number of you on this call. As to what are the specifics in the question that I think I was sent, what are the things that enable a project or keep a project from succeeding? And there's a list of 6 or 7 things. I can't remember what they are right now, but all of those things are very, very likely to contribute to a project succeeding or failing. Abigail, do you have those things available in that question that you sent out?
Let's see.
Actually, I just found it. I'm sorry. I have
Oh,
it here.
quick.
So,
I was gonna say I
um,
had it. I got that.
you should mute your white screen there. There you go. So what structural issues, parenthetically, property control, governance, revenue model, timing, market demand can derail a project? And I would answer all of them. And all of them usually do. And the projects that succeed identify those issues well in advance before a project is conceptualized. It is, I want to beat a dead horse here, but I've literally sat in hundreds of meetings with people. We want this, we want this, we want this. And I asked that question. Fundamental question is, okay, well, tell me why and tell me what you gain from this project succeeding. Like what change comes as a result of this project that helps your organization or the community you're working with, have more durability, more viability long term, and how does it help the people you're trying to serve? So fundamentally, that's what I'm after on every project at the very earliest phase. We had the good fortune of working with the Hoopa tribe to bring food back to that community. We were hired by the tribe to got a call that said basically, hey, Ray's shut down and I heard you guys might be able to help us. And we did full operations plan, business plan, capital plan, full design and architecture engineering, and then managed construction through to completion. We brought in a number of team members from other expertises that we didn't have, grocery outlet or grocery specific expertise we didn't have. We brought somebody onto our team. We worked very closely with the tribe, and then handed them the keys to the store that they're still successfully operating. So that for me is a huge win as to, you know, there's an obvious dire need, if they had just called, let me just call an architect and get a design for this building, it's like it would have gone nowhere. So contextually, projects need to have all of those factors considered simultaneously. So governance, capital access, operations, strategy. As I said at the very beginning, design and construction is the last tool. And um, given a city block of land, a design can be a Taco Bell or a skyscraper. So design is never the problem. You can design anything. Money is the problem. Access to capital is the problem, and that is driven by operations and revenue sustainability within an organization. So we really hone in on that at the very beginning. Work on governance issues if there are significant. Those are always questions for me. Um, the Hoopa project I mentioned a minute ago, we had, oh boy, I think three different tribal councils cycled through because they have it every 2 years. There's an election. So we kind of had to, we got started in the middle of one tribal council election cycle, and then at the end of the project, we were in another one. So there were three different councils that had to get up to speed quickly, and it was challenging, but it all, I think, worked out.
How did you get the Kirk? Does
Yes.
this work? How did you get the financing on that? Who did you work with?
Oh my gosh. Well, this handsome gentleman in the left corner was very helpful.
Sorry, but I think
Ross,
this
you
was a good example, though.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ross and so Greenway and Ross and the tribe collaborated, and there was also a Native American, I think it's called Native American Bank, that brought a consortium of capital to the project as well. So I think in partnership there was a kind of a coherent capital stack that was developed through multiple sources. The tribe, of course, put up money as well. But it's never usually just one check writer on community projects. It's multiple sources of capital, and all that is driven by how operationally viable are you? Can you sustain debt? Can you pay debt over a period of time? What are your revenue sources? And how likely are those to shift and change and become less available to you? So those are big issues. Ross, you had
And
something.
I think the Hoopa grocery store is a really good example because it's all out there, so it's not confidential. But the very beginning, which you might not remember, originally we were approached, hey, they got to have a grocery store out there. What can you do to finance this? You talk about getting architecture first. It's like,
Yeah.
well, it's not about financing. What do you got? Who's playing on this? So I actually invited Native American Bank to come in and like, we've got one, a big one. And then it, they didn't give them a great deal, but they kind of went around us and we ended up doing it. We, meaning us, Malaria Foundation, Headwaters, Community Vision out of San Francisco,
Yeah.
and RCAC. That really helped us on the capital stack portion. But initially, they just wanted to get this going because now that Raise is closed, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? I said, you really got to get somebody that can kind of like get the big picture. And sorry, it's not an advertisement for Greenway, but what they did is went in there, met with the entire community, which is not easy on tribal stuff. And it took 6 months to 12 months, but like, what do you want this to look like? How's this going to end up? How is this going to impact the whole center there? Because you guys looked into how's it going to integrate with the existing post office? Is the parking lot right? And that you using and the technology on the grocery store itself was really kind of cool. But the neat thing is that it happened. It was a lot of work on your side. I know that because
Yeah.
just doing all that community work, but the proof's in the pudding. It's still there. It's still tribally run. It still employs tribal members. And because of that, other things have come full circle with that group. And again, it's hard not to emphasize. I think Redex got money in there. We got money in there. Malaria Foundation's got money in there. Headwaters, and then two other CDFIs. That helps for your future capital stack. So anyway, it wasn't just, oh, here's a nice design, let's do it, because there's
Yeah.
a lot that went into that. So that's
Well,
probably
that was a great project because there was a super clear need for that community. But most people, when they come to you, maybe that isn't so clear. And in the tribe, it's a whole community, so they have a lot of support coming in. So what if you have a pretty small CBO, a community-based organization? that comes to you, what should they have in their hands? Like, you want to talk about organizational stuff. Should they come to you with, their financials from their business when you first talk, or what are the things that you need to know from them immediately?
That's a great question. So I think the primary thing I need to do is understand the organization first, understand the people that are involved, understand why this project feels relevant or important to them. Financials can come in the second or third meeting for sure. And then at that point, we break down what we would need to judge. I ask this question of all clients, like, if we handed you a free project, could you sustain it financially indefinitely? Because operations is the biggest challenge. The construction costs and the access to funds is not the most important problem. The biggest problem is, can you sustain this thing indefinitely? And what are your sources of revenue to do that? Very often that is where a project breaks, because it's like, well, we'll just keep raising money to pay debt. And I'm always, my thing on that is like, well, debt isn't something you can do a capital campaign for. Like, nobody wants to buy out your debt over the next 30 years. So operationally, there's a shift that needs to happen in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years to enable you to grow revenue to a point where you could accomplish having something serviceable like small debt. Um, and generally speaking, the most fundable thing in a project is actually the construction element of it. The other pieces of it, which are, I think, more important, are the getting it ready for construction, like all the design, all of the financial and organizational and strategy stuff that we would need to do. All of that needs to be done coherently, and it's the hardest part to fund. I mean, it's who wants to fund somebody like me to come in and help somebody? People want to see a building, they want to see something finished, and they'll support that. But does that answer the question, Susan?
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering, from that very basic level, you're just like, I've got this idea and I've got a
Yeah.
dream, and what is it that I need to even start a conversation? And I know that happens a lot with business lending too.
Mhm.
These are all projects that you might do once or twice in your life, but most people don't do it several times. So how to start is a big one.
For
Um,
sure. Go ahead.
the other thing is, I just want to make sure that you mentioned this because you said something about it today, and I thought it was so smart, about prevailing wage and how you had somebody who got a bunch of money from the federal government, but now that's going to make their whole project so expensive that they might have been smarter not to take it. Can you just address that opportunity for funds and that opportunity cost if you take the wrong ones? And um,
Yes, that's I was bringing that up this morning on another project. So prevailing wage, as some of you know, me, but probably all of you know, it's a state wage requirement when any public money is given to a project or invested from a public entity to a project, gifts or operating revenue supporting debt, or if the actual money is coming as a block from a federal agency or state or local agency, it always has a public contract code requirement for labor. And that prevailing wage labor rate is set in California by the Industrial Relations Board in Sacramento. We are tied to the labor market standard of San Francisco. So a sheet metal worker working at one of our local sheet metal working operations up here without prevailing wage might make $25 to $30 an hour if they've been there a while. With prevailing wage, they're set in San Francisco's labor standard of $80 to $120 an hour. So just that one receipt of money from a state or local source has now driven your labor cost 30-40% higher, and that could end up driving the budget, or 50% higher or more, could end up driving the budget up by 30% overall. So I'm a labor guy, so it's not a criticism of the unions, but it's a really big impediment to public projects and private sector, say nonprofit projects that really have a lot of community benefit. It's a huge problem. There's been some negotiations around waiving prevailing wage requirements on housing built near transit in certain cities. That's a new law that passed last year, and that's the first crack I've seen in the labor force, the union labor force's control over laws passing at the state legislature on construction. So yes, things like that are big issues. And on this on a project we were discussing this morning, I won't name, but it's common that somebody will. I brought up this other project that I'm aware of, receipt of funds. I think it was $2 million, and by receiving that $2 million of of money from the state, they now have a $5 to $10 million more expensive project. So once you receive money from state or local sources, every dollar thereafter is prevailing wage. So that's the trigger that a lot of people don't recognize. And so, hey, we got money, yay, we're excited. And also, whoops, because now our project is $5 to $10 million more expensive. So that's this is stuff that I will, when I die, I won't miss knowing, but I'm glad I know it now because it's helpful. But it's torturous to learn and get good at. It's very complex, and there's a lot of different ways to view it. From the labor side, it's great. It helps stabilize families and it helps build a strong, connected union labor force, and can put a lot of money into local pockets. There's a lot of people that work in construction up here that are really excited when their bosses bid prevailing wage. The joke is, Bob got a new truck. Oh, I guess they did a prevailing wage project last year. That construction guys always show up with a new motorcycle or a new truck. Like 6 months later, it's like, cool, we got prevailing wage on this last project. So that's pretty common.
So the
Um,
reason I brought that up is because that's one of those things that if you don't do this all the time, you would never think of.
yeah,
Um, and it's such a big impact on the cost of your project versus the money you're bringing in. I don't even think I would have thought about that until you mentioned it this morning. I went, oh, yeah, turning down money sometimes is better in the long run if you're looking at your project pricing. So I just wanted to make sure we said something about that.
yeah. There's a question that on one of the bullets that I was sent from I think Xenia or Abigail. It says, what makes a project impossible versus simply difficult? Um, that's a really good question. I guess I'll give you a politician's answer. The If it's not aligned strategically, it should never happen. And I wouldn't say that makes it impossible. It makes it a bad project, and that bad project will blow up in the face of the organization that did it. In my opinion, I've seen it countless times. One example that comes up is Fort Bragg built a pool with a benevolent foundation donor, philanthropist, built a pool, and nobody really assessed the actual cost of running the pool every year, and literally almost caused the city of Fort Bragg to go bankrupt because the cost of operating a pool is at least $1 million when you don't have the resources to do that. And these are major problems. And I think very often that after, like I said a minute ago, if we handed you a completed free building, you still have to operate it. You still have to run it. When we worked on the McLean Community Center project in Fortuna, it's a 38 acre. We were a cow pasture and we want a community center. And that's basically when we got in. We got invited in and we, competed and we won that job. And it is a very significant and important part of my experience. I loved working with them, and it's now I think an actual viable part of Fortuna, and it's got a totally different set of environmental or financial conditions than most projects. It's got the backing of a well-endowed foundation that's going to have money to pay for whatever needs to happen there. So in that case, I didn't have to force the conversation around operating revenue and financial security because they have a lot more money. So
I have to jump in on this only because I'm familiar with all those things, and that's one of the things that I wrote down here. What makes a project impossible versus simply difficult? I put because most of ours are community projects, but it works for business projects as well. I put revenue model. If it doesn't cash flow, it doesn't cash flow. It's as simple as that. So, having lived in Fort Bragg when they were raising money for 20 years for that pool, but then a guy who invented the widget, I don't even remember, he's long gone, but his foundation, he's from Fort Bragg. His foundation wrote a check for this. It's 2 pools, by the way, if you really want to get technical.
please.
So they started building it, and it's great. And then, well, we're just going to figure we'll get this other half when we get around to it. So that's before it was done. So then they were able to go back because this guy invented a lot of widgets. I forget who it was. It doesn't really matter, but
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
they got the other 20 million. So it's done, turnkey, 2 pools, one that goes 4 miles an hour so the family can do it. And they're going to rent out some of the side buildings or the conference rooms. That's not enough for $1 million. So if they hadn't been able to convince to put a bond on there, so everyone has the bond funding or
Yeah,
not the bond, it's a parcel tax
parcel
on
tax.
all
Yeah.
of them. Yeah, so that's how it worked. that's not the way you want to do it. You jump out of the plane without a parachute. I think we can get one. Um, so that it didn't cash flow. It just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a very common problem. I was picking up a few comments on the margins here. Greg, you and I are working on a project now. Is Greg still here?
His face
So
is.
operations and management, maintenance is a huge issue. So I think you're bringing up a really important point on the public sector side. I was on the founding board of the Humboldt Trails Council when we were still trying to convince city managers in Arcata and Eureka that the trail was a great project and that they should help build the trail between Arcata and Eureka. And now, of course, it's done. It's amazing. But the biggest impediment to that going anywhere conversationally was, well, how do we pay for operations and maintenance? Like we don't have the money. The same is true of the marina and Eureka. The same is true of pretty much any project. There's just not enough O&M money continuously available to projects once they're built on the
Yeah, the
public.
small boat basin is, it was like a beautiful EDA funded project with a small boat basin and the wharfinger. Uh, but you look down there and I mean that small boat basin got it really bad, and it's like it comes out of the city general fund to fix it.
Yeah, and I think when we worked with the city of Eureka and the Visitors Bureau and a couple of the funders, the boy Lee kill me because I can't remember the names of all of them. Eureka Lodging Alliance and Humboldt Lodging Alliance and Arcata Lodging Alliance to do the Redwood Skywalk. I had to build a full operations plan for revenue sustainability to give to work with Miles, Lee, and Gretchen at the zoo at that time to share with them. And essentially, what I was recommending is that we skim whatever 10% or more off the of the revenue from this thing every year, and we just bank it into an escrow account because we're going to replace the Skywalk 10% a year of the next 20 years is going to be rebuilt in pieces as things happen and fail and trees crash into it. Fortunately, that's not happened. We designed it and it got built really well, so that has not yet happened, but it's coming. There'll be a day when a tree falls through part of it. We know that's happening. And I honestly don't know. I have not tracked has the city actually set aside money. I know they're making money now from the Skywalk that was never available to the city before the project, which is in itself a huge win. But essentially, the city, according to Miles, of course, the city is set up basically to pay for retiree benefits and to keep cops and firefighters paid, and that's pretty much all they have money to do. So it's challenging to set aside enough money in the public sector side to do O&M, as you mentioned, Greg.
Well, and if anybody, I mean, perfect example is county buildings and properties in Eureka and elsewhere. I mean, they just don't have the funds to take it up. Those some of the worst looking properties downtown, and you can't blame them, right? Because it's general fund money. And it's like, well, what are we going to do? Public safety or mow the lawns and keep things painted? And
Right.
ultimately, though, it bites them in the butt because they have to turn around and tear down and rebuild a new building,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
like
significant.
Garberville. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, are there questions of what I've said? I've talked a lot and maybe too fast. Pause here if there are questions.
Well, you mentioned the project that we're starting to kind of work on, and it's fortunately, I mean, the having the finance background, I can have certain conversations with the board that's very excited about this is Eureka Theater, but we're looking at big numbers there, and it tempers the enthusiasm, but also I think more importantly, sort of informs the strategy in terms of fundraising or how we're going to do certain things for the repairs over there to have that conversation about operational revenue and really digging into that. And we haven't had in 25 years what we would consider a typical year there. So we're making a lot more money. I mean, it's a lot easier now to understand over the last 6 months how we can do this.
Yeah.
But that's, for us and the lending industry, it's like, okay, great, come back in 2 years and see if you've really sustained that kind of net positive cash flow.
Hmm.
Um, so I like what you're saying, and what Ross is saying is like, have that, you have the idea, and then you got to look at how do you sustain this. Now, if you don't have uh, that kind of revenue to sustain certainly a debt piece, then go out and raise the money as gifts and build an endowment if you can do that, or just reduce the cost of your cash flows there. But as
Yeah.
I remember having a conversation years ago with the railroad, believe it or not, when they were trying to convince me to support the railroad here. And I basically told the board member and the executive director, any fool can convince somebody to spend the money to build something, but what's your cash flow on day one? And they had to say, we don't know. And I
Yeah.
said, so why are you even having this conversation? And of course
Yep.
it went away. And now it's a beautiful trail. So there you go.
I
I
like
always like
that.
that Mark Twain quote, like a fool and his money are soon parted,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and I like the mission-driven folks running nonprofits are by no means are they fools. They're amazing people, all of them. But financial acuity related to projects is not in the training guides. It's not
Mm-mm,
something that you walk
mm-mm.
in knowing how to do. And unless you've done a project or 100 like me, like it's just not skill set you would gain. It's very complex. The money part's really difficult. The operational challenges are significant.
I
Um,
I think there's a cultural difference too to being like a nonprofit who wants to do something. You feel like you need to go in
yeah,
really optimistic, but both Kirk, who says I try to break the project first, and Ross, who says I write my exit plan before I write my strategy, you guys both look at how to break or how something will go wrong before you look at anything else. And I just think that's really, uh, it's against what most people who are going into a situation like this wants to think. They want to
That's the
think.
lender's curse. We're all downers.
Yeah. But it's helpful though for like O&M because I don't know why I'm just fascinated with that. I just want to make sure it's sustainable. Everyone talks sustainable. But if you're gonna get in your capital stack some foundation money and stuff, you can show like if this happens, this if we can get this built, this is how they're gonna run it. So it's no different than a foundational or for the bank or for us. Does it cash flow? Cash flow doesn't sound right. I gotta find a sexier word than cash flow. Is it sustainable? Everyone likes that. So if you get this free pool, can you afford to keep it open?
yeah,
The answer is either yes or no, and just show us how to do it. It's no different than any other business plan, and everything's kind of a variation on that. Also, on one of the questions, first thing you ask and that kind of stuff. It's like, well, there's never a first thing. I go all over the place, but um, the one thing that Kirk kind of mentioned, which we see on just business plans and stuff, running a business is one thing, building the building for the business is totally a different skill set. Some people have a good vision, others not a clue. Say, this building's really cheap. I want to build it here. It's like it's on a toxic dump. There's a reason why this is so cheap. You need to talk to an expert, or it's not zoned for it. I've had those come in there ready to go, and we looked in 2 seconds and just said this is zoned residential. So what you're asking, you're going to have to walk 2 blocks over. This actually happened to the city hall from here.
yeah,
So, well, we have a good feeling about it. And we were like, I don't. But I mean, just ask them. Well, they're hard to talk to. No, they're not. Go to the front desk. Will they do an exception for this? And
yeah.
you already know the answer. The answer is no way, because they didn't have parking out there for this other thing they wanted to do. That's really important. So for a lot of us, what I do, or just kind of assessing, are they ready for this, or is your board ready for this? And a lot of times they are. I mean, they've got more. The ones that come in, you go, wow, they've been thinking about this for a long time. Now they've got this opportunity. Okay, now you're ready for the next step. And the one takeaway is everyone's consistently different. You just never know what's going to pop up. So you have to look at it all and get some help permits are important. You can't poo-poo that. A lot of people think their personality is just going to win them over. I go, no, it's either yes or no. So make sure let's do the harder or the easy. Some of these are easy to find out. And actually, I'm not giving you another plug, Kirk, but way back when we bought this building, it was foreclosed. And I got it for under 200,000, but it needed a little work. Okay, a lot of work. So, but in crawling around, looking at foundation stuff, it's like it's worth it. It's not sliding down a hill. It's not this. Took it to the studs. You oversaw it. I don't do that every day, but I also know some big stuff. And it really, with the right planning, the projects, you can do it.
Yeah.
It's the ones with a couple extra zeros, you just can't personality your way through. We really want to do it. We have this vision. Does it
Agreed.
cash flow when you vision this though? How are you going to, yeah.
I was going to add one thing that I think's a pretty important distinction on project level. So there's projects that actually are truly transformative, that enable revenue, that enable financial challenge, financial change and improvement. And I find that theory of change model of how is the organization going to be improved through its strategy, its initiatives, or its project, a development in the context of that strategy. Like those are really important things to understand. So it's a difficult thing to fund because funders are looking backwards, trying to also look forward. So if we go forwards, can we also make sure that they have enough revenue based on history to move this thing to the next phase? Oftentimes in the transformational projects where real revenue is enabled, and I've done a bunch of private sector work too, and we have, I can't name them, but one client was, wow, their business is going to triple if we can get them funded, but their current revenues are, passable, but they're not perfect. So in fact, it was a really, really hard thing to fund. And it actually ended up getting funded, that it is tripled. It is doing great. They are making a ton more money and making a lot more profit. But it was the hardest thing to fund because nobody would underwrite it the way that you would traditionally underwrite a project. And I think that's where CDFI, like North Edge, is so valuable in that they can look beyond the typical banker, glasses and find problems. Redux, same thing. It's like, how can we see this opportunity that this organization's doing as a financial benefit long term, even though right now, based on history, they're kind of not exactly where we want them to be. I don't know, Ross or Greg, if you guys want to tear off on
Well,
that.
that's a really good point. And, okay, yeah, I said Greg was on the Cooper Grocery Store, and I was wrong. They weren't on that one, but they were on the other one, the Carson Block building, which is really interesting because the banks couldn't do it because it's not earthquake. There's nothing earthquake. It's not. It wasn't earthquake retrofitted yet, but we could see it, they could see it, everyone. So we got this BIA guarantee. All right, we're going to refinance this stuff so they can get their grants. That's going to help them move forward to that. This is what's going to offset because the banks are going, oh, no, no, no. You get it all done and then we'll think about doing something. It's like, well, okay. But it's one of those star success stories that really did work. So you have to think outside the box. One is how do we protect the Humble Area Foundation, Headwaters, REDAC, and us? We all split this $1.5 million initial thing so they can get their $2 million grant for the facade, but also qualify for this other grant, CDBG and New Market Historic. We didn't know all that was going to come, but it did. So, but if you could offset the risk of stuff, that's the part that's interesting. When if we get the right experts in the room, and it's for a worthy cause, and it makes sense. It's like, wow, the sky's the limit. And each one's different, but being able to grab the experts in the room, I know a lot about a couple pieces, but you grab the other ones like, no, we did something like that before, and we got this money from outside the area. It's like, oh, and you talked about uh, prevailing wage. On the smaller things, we can get around that sometimes by using not this money, but that money for it. Or I've had it where the nonprofit has enough money there. Okay, we'll fund this part of it, but you fund the construction part because it wasn't that much, not
Yeah.
enough, and then it works. So it's, but each of these are kind of specialized discussions, and that's why you want, more experts in the room is better. That's all I'm saying.
It
And you
is.
guys were very helpful because like on the permitting and stuff like that, and ADA and how you designed our ramp out front. The ramp that we have for the ADA ramp is exactly where the old one was, except the old one was like, this far from it wasn't, someone just poured concrete, 20 years ago, and it wasn't to code. But when you guys redesign stuff, oh, we can take it all the way to the sidewalk. It's amazing what an extra foot one direction, something this other, and all of a sudden it just flows. But anyway, that's having the right engineer, the right eyes on the project.
Yeah. And I think part of what I've strived to do in the business is we have all the in-house expertise to really do anything. We start with this kind of I would say assertive project goal of like prove it to me that your project is going to work, and I'll help you. But I'm a skeptic. I'm not a cynic. I'm a skeptic of a project idea until I can run numbers and sit and talk through it. And I deeply like every client I've ever worked with. I don't have any have nobody I've never ever worked with that didn't enjoy working with. So I don't want to say that, but also it's really important that you have as much expertise as possible that's available to you. And like I said, I've really strived to get better myself at certain things rather than bringing five more people into the project that could confuse things. So like I've
Right.
become really jack of all
Yeah,
trades.
I'm thinking on the initial when you're first looky loo, or how long you guys been thinking about this, or is this really? I think you said it better. Is this really uh something that fits your mission, and is it making things better, or did you
Yeah.
just buy? I always use a piano. Someone says, "Hey, got a free piano for you." It's like, well, that's great, but I don't play and I don't really have a place to put it. But it's free though, huh? So I mean, you have to. It's like a free elephant. Is this what you should be doing? Anyway,
That's such a good analogy. A free piano and a free elephant. I never thought that sentence would come out of somebody today. That's great.
So
I've got a free.
oh, when I think
Okay.
about this whole conversation, I think about, if we can only go back in time to the beginning of Redwood Region Rise when this started, that is that opportunity where you're like, we have a bunch of money. And I think people really feel like, what can I do with that money? And then they start building it because of the opportunity. And, a lot of them had those ideas in their mind, but not really thought through. I don't know when or if this would ever happen again, but are there pieces of this conversation that we could build into the front of any kind of grants that helps people get in that mindset before they start out?
Yeah, one of the things Ross and I talked about, and Ross and I had a weekly like meeting at my office for, I don't know, a couple of years. It was great.
Yeah.
He would come over in his little captain's jacket with brass buttons, and it was right after Rotary, looking smart. So one of the things that we talked about was being able to have like a replenishing fund that was available to like hire us at the front end to like screen projects to make them understand feasibility, get them into the right channel, move them in the right direction so Ross could help fund them. And then the part of that project fee would come and pay for the next project to go through the same process. So there's kind of recirculating money. And I think the pandemic happened right when we were getting close to cracking that nut, and then everything kind of fell apart in both design, construction, and the rest of the world. So we kind of dropped that. But to me, I think that model still makes sense. Is that there's feasibility money, there's analysis money, there's a series of ways to perpetually fund this so that it's available to people at this earliest phase possible. I mean, our discovery phase fees I mean, they range from like $9,000 to $50,000. We're never trying to make money on these. We're trying to like cover our costs and work with people to identify if we can help them or not, or if they can actually do something. It's not intended. The barrier is as low as possible. And so I think that something like that is needed for ipnic projects at the earliest level, kind of throughout the region. We've all seen projects, yay, and then oh, I mean the fish farm, right? I mean the aquaculture project, like the wind is caught in a little political snafu for a while, but that'll eventually uncork because it makes sense. But like this fish plant, like did they not really? I mean, they shifted the fish species multiple times. They got different investment. I mean, there were investment skeptics on that. I was one of them from the very beginning. I kind of saw it coming. I was like, how does a $1 billion investment on the Samoa Peninsula make sense to anybody from an overseas investment pool? I don't get it. Like, help me understand it. So I think oftentimes like projects at all scales are semi-delusional. Um, and it's sadly it's true. And I think private public sector projects, my partner used to do a lot of schoolwork. So his firm would be hired by a school district that had bond money out, and they would design a project. They didn't work with the contractor because they couldn't by law. The contractor would then bid the work. They'd put it out to bid. It would come in too high. They'd be hired by the same school district to start over and redesign it. And this has happened. I mean, one project he redesigned, literally redesigned it and re-permitted and reapproved it 11 times before it finally got built. And they paid the fee every time. And that's why he works with me, because he has strong ethics and morals and believes that's unethical. And it is. I mean, it's not illegal, but it's not ethical as a design firm to keep doing. But that's the system that they're in, and that's the system the school districts are in. They're not able to do this feasibility stuff at the very beginning right size the project in alignment with future budgets. It's not allowed under code and by law. So that's another big impediment to innovating around these things is the actual codes that are written in place. So
Lee, I'm curious if you have any thoughts. Your sector investment coordinators, spend a lot of time with people about their projects, often around the funding of the projects. But is there anything that has come up that you've heard today that's been relatable or translatable to them?
Well, Paloma's here, and so I think Paloma could probably speak to that better than I could, particularly because with our Working Lands and Blue Economy, which are the bulk of our Catalyst awardees, I'm thinking of trees right now, Paloma. They've got
I've already emailed Abigail for Kirk your contact information because I think he would be a wonderful presenter because we have this organization that has formed this rural resilience partnership about like maybe 10 different organizations. It's quite a few. And through this consortium, they're planning up to 3 to 4 different training facilities. And one actually has been purchased, but the others have not. And frankly, one of them, I know the organization is very shoestring, mostly volunteers. And, one thing that struck me is we've been talking a lot about prevailing wage and the issue of how hard it is to navigate that from a financial payroll perspective. And so we've been looking at doing maybe some trainings around once you have prevailing wage, how you manage it. But the fact that you brought up about, if you even accept that funding, be prepared for that to really increase your budget by a very significant percentage. I don't know that if people are really thinking about it from that perspective. And that is really critical information. And just also the piece about the operating component. You would think it's obvious, but I think it's sometimes not. And so I do think walking people through some of those frameworks and getting people to really think about that is going to be really important, as they look to launching these other training facilities.
yeah. I'll put my contact info on the message on the side here so
Cool.
you guys can all see it. But yeah, I think you're bringing up a really good point. It's I mean, I guess I should back up one second at the beginning. I'm a skeptic of a project, but I'm also a champion of a project because I think that the needs for these projects is real. Like it isn't that people are doing dumb things. It's that society has not picked up all the pieces to serve the people that need the most help, or it's often the case that a nonprofit is the one doing it. And and the need for the project is good. I think the challenges are sometimes insurmountable because of access to capital and ongoing operational revenue. So I think back to what makes it impossible is really that. It's just can we sustain operating revenue to service debt or service the change that this project's going to bring? That's what it comes down to. I think for me, that's the thing that makes a project impossible or not.
I want to say too that the thing I love about working with Kirk is that and having somebody who sort of objectively is outside, they're not outside the project, but when you're in the project, all your passion is there, the people that you're working with, board of directors, whatever that is. But Kirk can provide that reality check that I think needs to happen sometimes. That no, we're not going to be able to do it to this scale. We've got to downsize a bit. It'll still be a great project, but future thinking says that if we try to do too much of this, we're never going to be successful. So I think it's important sometimes to have that reality check on some of these bigger projects. And sometimes it's a person like Kirk who can provide that because sometimes folks are just too in it. They're too passionate about it. They're not thinking clearly about outcomes. Yeah.
Thank you. I loved working with you too, Lee. We had a great time. But I think that's a really good point. The forest to the trees, or founders syndrome. Like pick your frame here. We've all seen it. Founder syndrome, I think, is really challenging because that's somebody's got a lot of passion, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of institutional control. Man, that's a hard one to get around. But we've had good success. I'll tell it like one client project on day one is like, this project will fail unless it has a 500-person event center attached to it. And it wasn't Greg that said this. Um, I'm like, okay, well, cool. Like, let understand like what is the rationale and criteria for that statement. oh, it's really important. We can make a lot of money doing like things like weddings and conferences and events and this, that, and the other. And I was like, okay, would you be open to hearing that if I do some quick back of the envelope math, if I just quickly show you what the likely cost to do that and the cost of debt to do versus the cost of income from the revenue sources that you're mentioning, would you be willing to see that? And I literally took an hour, ran a spreadsheet, and then shared it with them, and they were like, "Oh yeah, never mind. Okay, we'll do the other parts of the project too," because it was like, I don't think you understand. Like that's gonna cost a fortune, and the debt on that is gonna be 5 times more than you can make per month in revenue on the most rosy projections. And it was literally that. And then it was like, oh, okay, let's just do the rest of the project then. I was like, okay, that's what I thought.
And I think it's different hearing it from somebody like you who seems like a neutral outsider than a lender. Because with the lenders, it's just they don't want to give me money. There's
Yeah.
a different sort of expectation, and when you're rejected, it feels like it's not really grounded in something like that. So having somebody that's kind of in between those two discussions is really important.
Yeah, I think one small final anecdote for me, but back in the earliest days, I think 2010, we had somebody come in the door and uh they owned land in Southern Humboldt. We were never involved in cannabis production stuff, and they knew that. Um, we never did anything associated with it, but they were passionate about renewable energy. So they had 500 acres that they'd had since the late 70s, early 70s, and they were going to build a wind farm. And they had already hired a stockbroker on Wall Street to develop their enterprise and to sell shares of their corporation when we were ready to do it. And they'd already spent about $500,000 of money they didn't really have. And I said, "Oh, do you have the National Renewable Energy Laboratory wind study that would cover your region and your property? Because that's a free resource online." And they said, "Oh, I don't know what that is." Okay, okay. Have you looked at your transmission distance from PG&E? Because every mile you develop of transmission is like 10 or $12 million. And so it's basically like, here's somebody walking the door who's already spent a lot of money hiring an unethical expert. Literally, the project broke in like a minute of talking to me and my partner David at the time. We pulled up the National Renewable Energy Laboratory website. We looked at the wind resource. It's like a 5% wind resource instead of an 80% wind resource. It's not fundable. It wasn't a project, but they had basically thrown away all this money. So that for me, that was kind of one of the earliest inklings of like, oh wait, we need to break projects. We need to kill them early because otherwise we're spending people's money. Like this is terrible. This is so unethical. Anyways, that's my final. You get where I'm coming from.
Ross, when somebody comes into our office and they want to do a project, what are the first things that you ask them when they come in the door?
Have you looked at the energy map if it's for a wood turbine? No, it is kind of all over the place because I kind of get a feeling for like, how long has this been a plan? Or it depends on the plan. I hate to have like these data points, but with some talking, you can kind of tell. I try to see if it's a board or if it's a nonprofit. Is there board in on this? Has this been in the works for a while? Well, I just want to hear the story, and if it's kind of like what Kirk said, it's important that we have the 500 space
Event center. Yes.
meeting room or a venue. It's like, what is that based on?
Yeah.
It just has to make sense. I don't know if that even makes sense. But just tell me about this project and who's supporting it. And my mind is like 17 things at once, but one of it's like if it's a nonprofit, they might be able to get some grants if it fits in somebody else's mission. And who have you talked to? And sometimes they come and they have some grants already interest, and it just makes sense. But so I can't really. Well, I looked at that question. I go, man, it depends on the person because I'm kind of not deconstructing it, but trying to see if they can answer a few hard questions. If they thought about that. Because sometimes, and it's like private businesses sometimes, they're going to start this business and they're really infatuated with, I don't want to pick something on, I'm just making something up, cupcakes, because we make the best, here, try this cupcake. These are the best cupcakes in the world. And so we're going to have pop-ups, we're going to do all this. And it's like, is there a demand for that? I mean, I like cupcake. Well, actually, I really don't. The frosting's too much for me. But is there really a demand for that? Or is this needed? Tell me about it. So anyway, I just have to I like to get the big picture first. Don't fill out an application. It's not a desk clear. That's Ask me a better one. That's it.
Y'all aren't terribly chatty. It is 4:30. I do think that this was a really important topic and that it'll be useful for people to go back and watch it, especially, some of these ideas about reframing in your mind what your project is. When they go to a lender, I think people are thinking just dollars, and not putting as much thought into kind of the sustainability, the mission, how does this grow the strategic goals of your business? I think those are all really smart things to think about. Is there anybody else on the call that has any other questions for these guys or for any of the other experts like Greg or?
I have another question for Kirk, maybe.
Uh-huh.
Kirk, you've done feasibility type studies, right? Through Greenway.
Yeah, dozens.
Yeah, is there ever a point where, because I often find that, especially if somebody's doing a capital campaign project and they know the answer that they want, like they want to build something or and they know the answer that they want. Oftentimes the feasibility study is about, can your community manage a certain amount of donor development, and then stacking that on some potential low interest loans, or building out giving campaign. So at some point, have you ever said, you know what, this just isn't a feasible project here? You're not going to be able to raise the revenue that you need to make this successful. I wonder about companies if they don't, are we realistic enough with potential project proponents, or just to say, you know what, this is just not going to work, or you need to drastically scale this back in order for this to be successful?
Yes, that's a great question. And yes, many, many times. When I can see it's obviously going to break, I don't want to get hired or get paid to do any feasibility work. I want to break it in the first meeting, and I've done that 25 to 30 times. And it's literally I give away an hour of my time to almost anybody, almost anybody. I mean, they have to have showered and they can't be mean. But if they're otherwise, looking for help, I can give an hour to almost anybody. And yes, I have I got one of the biggest projects I've ever done because I was hired by another entity and this person happened to be in the room watching me deliver the feasibility report to their board. That person was invited to a large meeting. And in that meeting, I presented my findings of this project is not going to be possible without the following 5 major conditions being met, all of which were not really going to happen. And that person said, "Oh my gosh, it's the first time anybody's spoken truth to that group of people in 20 years, and they've been pipe dreaming their way through. Magic is going to happen, and this thing will I basically said, like, with all due respect to you, I think you guys should find another passion. Like, this project's going to kill you guys professionally, and it'll kill the organization. There's no way to sustain it." And in the audience was this person who just basically said, "I'm hiring you to do a really big project. Congratulations." I mean, so yes, many, many times I feel like it's my obligation and it isn't, I don't know, to sound arrogant, but I feel like I have a really good finger on the pulse of what will make a project possible. And I have that pretty quickly. And then from there, I will have to do a full feasibility analysis that will include design, construction, estimation, and costs, finance and capital, any other organizational or operational issues in the way, strategy. So then we'll do all of that. as I felt like the project's pretty possible, given a few nudges and a few tweaks here and there, but I need to analyze it fully. And that's that discovery phase, that low cost, as low as we can possibly make it, first cost. And out of that, I would say probably by the time I'm in that, probably 75% of the projects get through that and they move out of that into a project. But I've already broken the projects that shouldn't be in I shouldn't spend anybody's money, even if it's not as much as I should charge them. I'm not going to charge them anything if I break their project. I don't want to do that. So recently had a client that had purchased property to do an affordable housing project, and they had gone so far as to hire an engineer to subdivide it and get it plat surveyed and do all this stuff. And I was like, so then they hired us to do the architectural. We came in way late on the project, and I just said, well, can I back up and talk about operations and finances and structure? And I built an operational plan with them to present to them at the second meeting we had with them. And it felt like to me it was the first time that most of them had understood what they were actually going to be doing every year financially. And they all freaked out and they just said, maybe we shouldn't do this project after all. And I was like, I think that's the right idea. I think that's the right answer. Because it was going to cost them about $500,000 a year to subsidize it out of the corpus of this foundation. I was like, well, why would you do that? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. So yes, many, many times.
I love that question, Lee,
I do too.
because we do see feasibility studies that I feel like people go in and they're like, my job is to write a feasibility study saying that this is going to work.
Yeah.
If you took yourself out of your role, Kirk, and put yourself in the role of somebody who is shopping for a contractor, what things should they be wary of when they're talking to somebody? Because they're going to want to go with the person that says, oh yeah, we could totally make this work. But what kind of bits of cautionary advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's a good question. And when you say contractor, you don't mean just the construction. You mean like a feasibility consultant.
Like a feasibility somebody that you're going to make a contract with to do.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. I would say primarily, and that's the hard part for people, as you said, because if you're already a project proponent and you're interviewing people who express a little bit of skepticism, which I do, it's challenging. I've definitely lost work a handful of times that way. But ultimately, when people go in, and this is the check on the person wanting to do the project, as the project proponent, they need to check their own attachment to the project's outcome. If you're actually needing help to understand if your project's feasible before you take the risk of bringing it before your board and spending money in the organization may not have a lot of, that's the first check. And if you can do that, then you can ask tough questions of yourself. And I think that's the primary thing that anybody needs to do from an organizational perspective is really ask tough questions of themselves before they ask tough questions of their future consultant. It's like, what am I actually trying to do here? Like, why is this so important to us? Like, really, really second guess their intent. I don't know if that answers your question fully, but I think that's my orientation to it is they need to be, before they reach out for help from others, they need to be really clear about what am I actually trying to do here? Like, why am I trying to do this? Like, and that question doesn't often come up until feasibility's done. Like, oh, why am I doing this? This isn't going to work. Does that make sense?
It did. And I think that was a really, really insightful thing for us to think about too.
Thanks.
Because, we hope to have a pipeline of projects that continues to come through, right? And so it would be
one of
nice.
the things I ask is if someone came to you asking to borrow money and this is all the detail they gave you, would you lend them money? You have your kid do that? John Dolby always had a great analogy about or a great story about how to let people down, which was this. Losses for these programs and for the bank are built into our model, right? And so, and as a loan officer, if we placed a loan, that went towards our bonus. And if the loan goes bad, it's a pain in the butt, but we're planned for that and we'll be fine. We might be a little depressed for a couple of days, but the person on the other side of the table will be ruined. So, when I think I wrote an article years ago about, in lending, sometimes the kindest answer is no. And when we see, especially, and this is what I get really concerned about in the industry with loan guarantees, because you reduce the risk to the lender to the point where sometimes that'll overtake um, their willingness to say no because their risk is so mitigated. But really, the person on the other side is ruined, and the organization in this case might be ruined. We went through that with a couple nonprofits that we worked with years ago, and they are coming to ask for us for money to keep operating. One was a care home, and another was a social service nonprofit. And when we really started digging in, um, it was like you're you're dead. You just don't know it yet. And someone forgot to tell you. And one went away, and then one had to be completely restructured. I mean, in both cases, we did end up putting capital in, but the necessary tasks that they had to undertake after that were painful. But they hadn't been managing that, and so they worked themselves down to the point where they're basically almost or were beyond the point of no return.
Yeah.
So we're the only ones that in some case, lender Ross and I and anybody in the lending industry, we're only in the economic development industry. We're the only ones that aren't required and have to be um, unenthusiastic about an idea at some point. And I've told this to the SBDC, and although they obviously give good advice about, yeah, it's not a good idea, but so much of what we do in this field is really pump people up and go for it. It's a great idea, and then when it comes down to the money, people. And it's like, oh yeah, everybody's talking about what a great idea you had. We're not going to do it. Sorry, and that's it's a hard thing to do, but it's
Yeah.
necessary.
I want to reference, like, I've been spending a lot of time focusing on this uh, um, the public sector and the nonprofit sector, but on the private sector, I mentioned that one project fail. I had a client that I convinced to slow down his project. They were about to spend $500 million on a solar project in Monterey County, and this is tier one capital, literally the center of Manhattan, sponsored by BlackRock. I mean, this is a huge fund. And they were basically ready to write a $500 million check to develop a massive solar farm in Monterey County. And I got contacted because I knew the landowner through a family member. And I was like, whoa, hold on a second. Like, let me understand. So there was some significant challenges to that project. And so I had to basically slow their roll. And that was a harder thing to do because they make money by putting money to work. They don't make money if money's not invested. So they were looking for me, and I was like, I'm just going to charge you very little. Like, I know you guys, this is not a lot of money, but it's like $25,000. And in 3 weeks, I basically broke their project for them, handed it back to them, and said, okay, go invest this money somewhere else. But it's this, like, the loop of enthusiasm and support, and let's get this going. Like, this has to happen. There's so much momentum built into projects sometimes that it takes somebody from the outside to see it, that this is off course. And like you said a minute ago, it's like, this is dead and you don't know it. It's already dead. This already died. And so anyways, I was shocked that it got that far with that much capital behind it, but it did. So when I showed them what I saw, they were like, how do we miss this? Because they had bought the project from someone else. So it's not just nonprofit people, it's public sector. It's everybody.
It is very hard to be objective when you have a dream. I always say that, I think one of the number one problems we have with the, business loans, it's the pride. We have businesses that go on way too long. Mine, I use myself as an example all the time. If we didn't have pride, we would have gotten out of that business in, 2 years instead of 7. But so whenever you tell somebody, I don't think this is going to work, it feels personal, right? Like, you're killing my dream.
Yeah.
And that's the same with people who have these really, often so genuinely, they want to help the world with these community development projects. And when you tell them no, they don't hear this isn't going to be sustainable. They hear you don't want to help the world. It's just a tough thing.
Now, I had a project when we developed the budget after doing conceptual design, and it turned out to be a big project. It was over what they had wanted to spend, and this is me being conservative, as I said this morning. I'm trying to be conservative at that early phase of budgeting. And this person, like in a boardroom of 25 people, just started massive sobbing, crying fit, and threw down her binder and said, the F word, and this isn't gonna work. We're done. It's project's over. Let's just all go home. I was like, well, hold on a second. Like, we got work to do here, but just let us work. And, we're supporting. And the project, of course, was viable, just wasn't as viable as they thought it was at that moment because they had grand visions. And so we scaled it back. It all became viable and possible. And so I'm still friends with that person. But it was a moment for her of like, wow, I've put 20 years into this. Why am I so upset emotionally? And sorry, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm trying to help you. That's a hard thing, to your point.
So sometimes we have these workshops. These are expert sessions. And Kirk, I don't know if you realize they all get recorded and we have a library so people can say,
Yeah.
if we're looking at this specific thing, you can go and learn about it. And this has felt kind of like a more personal discussion, a more, what happens to individuals when they go through this process than some of the bigger, more sophisticated discussions we have. But I think they're also very valuable. And I really appreciate that you guys came in to do it today.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any closing thoughts? We can end before 5. There's no law that says we have to take this all the way to the last minute.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Susan. Before I forgot, wanted to flag that for April, we will be shifting usually meet on the first Wednesday of the month, which would be April 1st, but we're going to shift to April 8th. So we'll adjust the calendar and looking forward to it. And Karen speaking, so wanted to flag that. And yeah, I definitely just wanted to thank you to Ross and Kirk for sharing your expertise with our intimate group today. And I know we'll have a lot of viewers watching the recording, and appreciate everyone making time. And I think we have a great foundation for building our strong pipeline of finance-ready projects.
Abigail, I have a quick housekeeping question.
You got it. Yes.
Is the meeting going to be moved to the second Wednesday thereafter or just for April?
Just for April,
Okay.
and then we won't have too many more, but yeah, so we'll adjust that and send an email. It's a good question. Awesome.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It was really great.
Nice to see you, Kurt.